In this video, I'm going to show you how to create Crackle collage papers a number of different ways and from 2 different Crackle products. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist and welcome to TuneIn Tuesday, where I share art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in my art demos, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up and if you would subscribe to my channel below. Links for all the supplies to make these papers are down below under the word more, and while you're there, you might also want to check out my free 5-day online workshop, Collage Kickstart, where I teach you how to use all the collage papers taught during TuneIn Tuesday to make fabulous collages the very first try. So let's get into creating gorgeous Crackle collage papers. We're going to play with 2 kinds of crackles, TriArt and Kroma. And how can we transform papers that are just ho-hum into something we really like because we've put a layer of crackle on top? Now, these aren't the only kinds of crackle available. In fact, I have experimented probably with a dozen different crackle products. These are the ones I started with, Crackle Paste by Golden and Liquitex Crackle Paste. However, I don't like these near as much as these because the crackle on both of these is very small. Now, if you want really small, subtle crackle, this is perfect. But both of these produce all different kinds of crackle depending on how heavy you apply it. I've pulled out a few of my papers that I like, but I don't love. And I don't use collage papers that I don't love. So I thought it might be interesting to add a layer of crackle to a couple of these and see how I might improve them and maybe turn them into a paper I love. So let's start with this one. I'm just going to tear this up into smaller pieces so I can experiment with it without wasting a lot of crackle. And then we'll see what the 2 different crackle products will do on the same kind of paper. So let's start with the TriArt. Now for this is a very easy process. I am just going to pour this on here pretty liberally. I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm going to keep it pretty thick. In fact, I'm going to make it thicker here and a little thinner on this side just to see the difference. So it might be hard to see, but this is going to be thicker here. In fact, I'm going to make it even more thick. The thicker the application, the bigger your cracks. So we're going to play around with this. Again, this is going to be the thinner side. Now, but I want a pretty even coat there, and I want this to be thicker. And now, this will take quite a bit of time to dry, probably overnight. Just to be sure, let me make sure I've got a nice thick coat on there. This paper is now dry, and as you can see, it's pretty crumpled up here, which makes it unusable in terms of using it as a collage paper. But I have a solution for that. So I'm going to take some matte medium and just pour it on here. I'm going to very gently spread this out. And basically what I'm doing is both sealing this paper and also relaxing the paper. So all these little crackles that are lifted, which I could easily peel off at this point, will actually flatten out because I am both wetting it and sealing it at the same time. So make sure it's very well saturated. And then I'm just going to use my hands a bit just to push it down because I want the matte medium to really get into both the crackle as well as the paper to flatten this paper out. So it's already flattening out in just a very short amount of time. Now again, at this point, I could easily flip some of these crackles right off of here. These are much more adhered because they're smaller. So this part of my paper, I put a very light coating of the TriArt. This was a very thick coating. And the difference is big cracks versus little cracks. They're both useful in terms of collage paper. I'm just going to work it in a little bit. Now, as I push down, I could create a little more crack, which is okay because I'm using crackle, right? Now, a little piece did come off. I don't know where it is, but a little piece right there came off, which kind of is interesting, really, because you can see the blue paper underneath. I really love TriArt because it does create such a big crack when you use really heavy application that you can see underneath, whereas a very light application is still very cool for a collage paper, but you don't see the blue, just very faint. Now, to get this to lay down the rest of the way, I'm going to put a piece of parchment paper over it and then a heavy book. And we'll let it sit for probably less than an hour and it will be completely flat. Now, while that one does its magic to flatten, let me show you one that's already been flattened. Now, this one was very, very curled and did the same thing. applied the matte medium to it, and it pretty much is flattened out. Now there's a little bit of curl to it, tiny bit, but when I actually adhere it to a collage, it will be perfect. Now I could use this just like it is. You know, every now and then I want a white piece of paper for a collage just to quiet a collage down, because there's so much pattern in my other papers. I want something that's white with less pattern. Yet this is still interesting. It's not just a white piece of paper. So there's a couple things I can do to make this interesting and actually pull it into my color palette. And one is to take some acrylic ink. Now I could also use watercolor ink. I could use just watercolor, but something that's very liquidy. And what I'm going to do first is just spray this down so it's very wet, and take a little bit of my acrylic ink. You can see that it automatically starts going into all of the cracks. So I can either paint the paper so it's blue, but I could also put some water here. I can also get some of that blue off so it's just in the cracks. Got a shop towel, rub this off a bit. And now I've got tinted paper, but I also see some darker blue. I could enhance that a bit. You can actually layer this, kind of like the dark blue. Just pat it dry a little bit. So that makes a very interesting piece of collage fodder. Well, let's do something different on this side. I've got some gold iridescent fine paint, and I'm gonna just pour a little bit of this out, and I'm gonna make it rather liquidy. Take an eyedropper and do the same thing up. But first I'm going to spray some water down just to make this extra watery. Now it's interesting, when I did that, that blue kind of seeped into, I'm going to try that some more. I kind of like the blue pouring into the actual holes there, the actual cracks. Cool. Let's add some gold to this too. In fact, I could even layer it on top of the blue. Because wherever I have large cracks, I'm going to have more of the paint going into those cracks. Help it out a little bit. Just going to pat it dry a little bit. So I take some of that surface paint off, but I'm leaving more of the paint in the cracks. That is really very cool. I'm kind of inspired to put even more where the blue is. I like the effect of the blue and gold together. You know, as always, this is always a process of suppose, what if, let's try. You never really know what you're going to get until you're going to follow that inner voice that says, that might look cool. For those of you who are not familiar with a shop towel, this is just a blue towel that you can, it's like a paper towel that you can get from a hardware store, but it's very, very sturdy. So I can use one shop towel many, many, many times. In fact, this one's been used probably over a year. I'll just rinse out the paint and then use it over and over and over again. So they're a little more expensive to buy than regular paper towels, but regular paper towels, you pretty much have to throw them away after each use. Whereas these, I can use many, 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 many times. There's a couple little spots. This is a big spot where the crackle actually peeled off, but I kind of like that look of it being a little, let's see if I can keep a lot of that paint in the crack. So I'm going to let this dry. I really love this as a piece of collage fodder. Very unusual. This one is now dry from the matte medium. And although it still has, you know, quite a bit of ripple in it, all of those crackles are now stable because of the matte medium. And I could easily use portions of this in my collage. Like I love that little piece. Or if I want something quieter with less crackle right here. This tears quite easily, which is great. So I can tear it into little tiny pieces. And I think I'm going to leave it just like it is. I'm not going to add any kind of embellishment to this because I really want some white papers, and their little blue peeking through makes it interesting to place next to another collage paper that might have more pattern to it. So I'm calling this one done. Now here's another one I created with the TriArt, and I just cut the paper in half so you could see what the original paper looked like. One of the fabulous things about using Crackle on some of your collage papers that maybe you don't like as much, it just recycles them. Now, I think this paper is really pretty, but I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to put some Crackle on top of it? So you really can't see the paper underneath anymore, but you do see a little bit of that orange coming through. So again, I want this to be a flat piece of paper. So I'm going to put the matte medium on, spread it out, push it down, and then just press it under a book. And then this will be usable just as it is, although I'll probably put a layer of some kind of paint to go into the cracks just to highlight it a bit. We'll see. Now, because the cracks are smaller, it's a little easier to push this down. And the cracks are smaller because I didn't put as heavy a coat on it as the last one. So I am just going to press this under a piece of either parchment paper or wax paper and then a book, and we'll see what we get. This one is now dry after a couple hours of being pressed, and I want to experiment with getting some kind of paint in those cracks to accentuate them. I'm quite attached to this iridescent gold fluid acrylic, so I'm going to put something here, make it pretty liquidy. I think this time I'm just going to try to kind of brush it on top, see if I can get it to go into some of those little creases. Let's see how this is doing. A shop towel, the effect I wanted. And I could put some more on it, you know, so it's a little darker. The nice thing about the TriArt is that it does take paint quite nicely, so you can actually color your crackle to, you know, what you would like for your collage or your mixed media work. So I could leave it just like that, or blot it off a bit, kind of like more of the white showing through, just my own personal preference. And that's a lovely gold piece of paper there. Really like that. And the little cracks show up even better with the gold paint. I think I'll just finish off the whole sheet this way. So now I'll have a beautiful piece of gold crackle paper to add to a collage. Be a nice accent somewhere. Yeah, I like that. So for this one, it already has a lot of blue coming through, so I want to stick with the blue. And I'm going to try some alcohol inks on this. So I pulled out a silver, a green, a teal, a blue. Let's see what this will do. So I'm going to wet this down just so this will run into all the crevices even more. And let's start, we'll just kind of mix this up. Start with the blue. Oh, look at that. It's gorgeous. So just kind of maybe mix colors up. A teal. Ooh. Help this out a little bit. I like kind of the organic look that it's just kind of taking on its own shape here. Let's put another shade of blue on. Oh, interesting. This is not running as much. I think it's because the paper is gotten a little dry. So let's see. You know, also could be maybe old alcoholic because it's not doing the same thing as the other ones. How about silver? Now, this silver is not doing what I want it to do. So I'm going to abandon the silver. I do have silver paint that I could add to this, but that is more like a gray as opposed to a bright silver. I try green. Ah, that's lovely. I think I need some more teals to pull this together. Oh yeah, now we're talking. A little bit more of the blue. And I'm just barely going to mix this in. Oh yeah. And it's interesting. Alcohol ink is kind of staining it in blobs in some cases. I still love the mosaic of this though. And again, I'm not using this whole sheet for a piece of collage. I'm very selectively picking a corner, you know, what appeals to me the most. And I think I need some more teal to blend in some of that green, which I don't like as much. There are just so many interesting valleys to choose from for a piece of collage fodder. I even like a lot of the white showing through because it just makes it a little more interesting. Next up, Chroma Crackle. Same thing. I'm going to put a nice thick coat of this. Now this does come out clear initially, but when it dries, it will dry completely white, actually. But there are many things we can do with this to bring color to it. But whatever surface I put this on, we're actually going to see the color of that paper in the cracks. So Crackle is a really fantastic way to enhance papers that you've previously created that you may not like as much, but you want to add some kind of oomph to. The thicker the application, the bigger the cracks I'm going to create. So just to be sure, I'm going to add a little more, trying to make it as even as possible, but when it's uneven in some of these different places, we'll just get different kinds of cracks, which is kind of interesting. So it doesn't need to be all even all the way around. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and it could take quite a bit of time, maybe even more than a day. This is the same piece dry, and as you can see, I have a lot of crackle, but a lot of it is lifted in terms of, not being flat. The crackle is not adhering to the paper necessarily, although it's still on there. Now, usually the crackle will turn white like it did there. There's a nice strip of white there as well. I really don't know why. I've got some kind of almost like transparent crackle, but what the manufacturer recommends is to take a medium and to thin it out by about half. So half medium, half water. I'm not sure if it would work just with the medium all by itself without watering it down, but we're going to follow manufacturer's instructions. Get a very soft brush, what this is, and I am going to very, very lightly, gingerly paint this with the intention of keeping that crackle in place. Now again, this is going to relax the paper, so we'll go flat again once I've got enough moisture on it. And as I'm here, I can actually push this crackle down and kind of push it into the paper so it's no longer sitting up. So it's pretty flexible at this point as I apply this medium to it. So do the rest of the page. And I'm very gently pushing that crackle back down. And the wetter it is, the easier it is to get it to relax and go back to its original spot, but you still have cracks in the middle. Now the part of my crackle that was white, which was right in here, it is now gone transparent, but it will turn white again once this dries. And I want the paper to lay flat as well. Now, what's interesting about using Kroma is this takes forever to dry. And when I mean forever, this was about 4 days, I believe, compared to the TriArt, which was for the most part dry in a day. In fact, I thought it wasn't going to work. It took so long for this to dry. I'm going to let this dry under a book and some wax paper and see what we get. The matte medium is now dry on this piece, and it's not exactly what I thought was going to happen. So I do have some white crackle right here, but the rest of the crackle, although it's laying flat with the matte medium on top of it, it's not all that impressive. You really can't see it. So what I'm thinking might improve it is if I put some kind of maybe dry brushing on top. On a little piece of paper here, I've just put some silver paint, but I'm just going to kind of lightly maybe try to highlight the crackles. And that seems to be working. I'm just placing it on top of the crackle so you can see the blue coming through. So I'm literally trying to paint on top of the crackle, not going into the seams. I could go into the seams too, but I would need to pour something wet on top, which I could do as a second layer perhaps. And this is an improvement. You can see the crackle and there's an iridescent shine to it. So I do like it better. I think I'll just finish at least this side of the page with that. Now, this is curling, but that is no problem at all because it's so flexible and all the crackle is stable. It's very easy to basically tear it and then glue it down. I actually like it a lot. Now that I kind of look at it, the iridescent shine of the silver actually has a really interesting effect. Now, one thing I could do is add some blue in those cracks, but I kind of like the blue from the paper showing through. So I think I'm going to call this one done. I like it the way it is. I also want to try this product and add some paint to it and apply it to a plain white piece of paper. This is actually a piece of mixed media paper. It's about 100 pounds. Add some of my Kroma to a dish first. Now by that, I could have also applied it on here and mix the paint right on here, but I thought I'd have a little more control. Now, I'm adding Nova paint to this. Now this color is actually a combination of two of my primaries that I use for all my collage papers. This is Phthalo Blue Green shade and Hansa Yellow Light and a little bit of white in there. Take all of that and put it on my sheet. Again, I'm just spreading it out fairly evenly. And I will put this aside to dry. Let's try one more with the Kroma, mixing the paint right on our paper. I'll lay down the Kroma first. This is another mixture of Phthalo Blue Green shade, Hansa Yellow Light, and a little bit of white. add it directly to our chroma, and we can actually mix it right on our substrate. Now, what's really nice about chroma is that when you add the paint to the crackle, it maintains the same color. Whereas if I added paint to TriArt, it would actually turn it a pastel color. This is a big advantage of using the chroma if you want a certain color. Now, I could go right to the edges, but I'm not because I don't want to mess my table up. And I think it might be interesting to have a little bit of white edge anyways. And I'll let this dry. So these two are now dry from the matte medium, and they have a little curve, but again, that would glue completely flat, and all this crackle is completely stable. And because these are two colors in my color palette, I actually like this as a collage paper all by itself. I'm not going to do anything to it. I like the white shining through. Both of these would be very interesting kind of elements in a collage that aren't as busy, but they still have interesting texture. Now, I actually created another one like this, so I think I am going to add something to the cracks on this one. I took some of my silver and just added some water to it so it's more liquefied. Try an eyedropper again, but first I'm going to wet this down, so hopefully this will spread. Now I got some blotchy paint here. Let's see if I can just spread that around a little bit. Well, what's going to happen here is it's still going to look white. However, it's going to have a silver sheen to it, which I think will also be super cool. I have nothing to lose. I've got blue acrylic paint. Let's see what, oh goodness, look at that. Went right into all the veins. That is the way to go. Really like how dark that veining is. It's gone right into the veins. Oh yeah, that is really gorgeous. Exactly what I was looking for. So the trick is very watered down paint. And just for fun, let's put a coat of this chroma just straight out of the jar on white paper. And once this dries, let's see what we can do with this as well. Perhaps with putting some dry brushing on here, or maybe some paint in the cracks. We'll just play with this. And this one's dry and beautiful cracks. That black actually was paint off of my table, so it just pulled it up, which came through on here. So first I'm going to try to get some gold in on some of the cracks as a first layer. Spray first, so the paint will run, hopefully into the cracks. That is so pretty. So that one's done. Before I put this product away, I decided, why don't I add some gold to this? This is my favorite gold. I'm gonna add some of this straight to it, mix it right into it onto the paper. I love following kind of my inner voice that says, you just gotta try this. I think this gold on top of these colors might be absolutely stunning. Let's see. I'm kind of mixing the gold up as I go here with the chroma. And I'm trying to cover up blue on that paper as much as I can. And part of the reason I can still see through it is because the gold isn't totally mixed in. So I'm trying to mix it as I go. I'll put this aside to dry. This one took at least 4 days to dry. In fact, I really thought it was a fail until one day I walked into my studio and lo and behold, it had actually dried and created this wonderful crackle. Now, this one, again, I'm just going to very gently paint this with the watered down medium to get all that crackle to sit flat. As I'm putting this on here, a little bit of the crackle is coming off the gold. So you need to be careful. I'm not going to try that, put that back on. I actually like, or maybe I will, because I can put it on there. Yeah, there you go. You want to be careful because I really want most of the gold to stay on there, but I love that blue showing through. So now I'm just going to very carefully push down that crackle and keep most of it on there. And it's pushing down fairly well. So I can't really put this under a book to dry until basically all of the crackle is relaxed, settled down. Okay, I'm going to put this under a book. See if I can get all the edges as flat as possible. Okay, this piece is now dry and I'm leaving it just the way it is. I just adore the gold cracks showing through that blue. This will be so pretty in a collage. And the outer edges, the fact that they're curling, I won't probably use the outer edges anyway, so I would probably just cut little pieces from this to use in a collage. Love this. So my collection of Crackle collage papers is now done, and I am pretty in love with these. Such interesting papers that will make a very interesting addition to a collage. So this is number 6 out of 6 consecutive collage paper demos. So I'm going to take all 6 of those different types of papers, and in my next art demo, I will show you how I actually fit them together into one collage. It'll actually be the extension of my TuneIn Tuesday collage series. So stay tuned for my next art demo. And thanks for coming along for this one, and have fun experimenting and following your own intuition for creating one-of-a-kind Crackle collage papers. To learn how to make many more types of collage papers, check out the links that are about to appear right here. And be sure to join my free 5-day online class, Collage Kickstart. The link to sign up is under the word "more" below. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would be deeply grateful if you would. And I'll see you back here next week for TuneIn Tuesday.